Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to 6 British things that are actually American. Usually this is the other way around, but it's always cool to something that for me is just super British. It's probably PG Tips tea bags. I cannot, if someone was to tell me that PG Tips is, I don't know, Croatian or something, I'd be like, there's no way. Bounty.
When I first moved to the United States all of those years ago, people would ask me, Lawrence, apart from your family and Yorkshire puddings, what do you miss most about Britain? And my answer was always the same.
British chocolate. I mean, sure, your average American grocery store might carry 1 or 2 Cadbury bars and mini eggs.
But Crunches, Twirls and Whisper bars were a lot harder to come by. However, America's confectionery aisles did contain one divisive British chocolate bar that I happen to love. Bounty. Okay, fantastic.
It's quite nice. Basically chocolate with coconut inside.
I can live with that, except 2 of the things that I just said are completely and utterly a little bit false.
The Bounty, a chocolate-covered coconut-filled fixture of UK sweet shelves, is not actually British at all, but American.
And I know what you're thinking. No, Lawrence, Britain sells M&M's, Snickers and countless other American top sellers. What makes Bounty so special?
And in some respects, you raise a valid point, especially since the wrapper is plastered with obviously Hawaiian imagery. You see, I always just thought that this was a product of fantastical marketing, kind of like how Britain came up with the world's most famous bears despite the total absence of bears in the British wild.
Furthermore, this one is special in part because of its name, which brings me on to lie number 2, the truth of which is this. Americans don't call them Bounties.
Here, the bar is branded differently depending on whether it's light or dark chocolate, with the names Almond Joy and Mounds applied respectively.
Both were launched in the first half of the 20th century in the United States.
And it was only a few years later, in 1951, that Mars Incorporated, which had no trademark attachment to the American varieties, launched Bounty in the UK and Canada as straight-up imitations.
Why not just call them Bounty? Like Almond Joy? I don't know, the name just doesn't work for me.
Sandwiched in between the launch of these sugar-laden chocolate bars was an even bigger killer.
World War Part 2.
Thankfully, as an antidote to the horror and misery unfolding before them, both countries found comfort in music.
Most famously, American band leader Glenn Miller was hugely popular on both sides of the Atlantic, to the tragic extent that he disappeared over the English Channel in 1944. As it happens, Britain's most lauded wartime music icon herself became synonymous with the English Channel. In addition to singing the famous World War II hit and Dr. Strangelove outro track, We'll Meet Again, Vera Lynn soothed Britain with the equally hopeful White Cliffs of Dover.
As the Luftwaffe homed in on Britain, who wouldn't have found comfort in the prophecy, there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover? Well, for one, ornithologists, because there are no bluebirds in Britain.
In fact, they're entirely endemic to North America, which also appears to have been true of the song's lyricist.
After it was released, New Yorker Nat Burton insisted he didn't realise that England didn't have bluebirds. Still, nice sentiment, Nat, if that is your real name. Anyway, speaking of iconic anthems, that brings us on to this.
No
Few
way.
things are more British than football, a sport whose origins can be traced back to ancient China. Really? Okay, fine, but few things really are more British than football chants and song.
Because everyone always says that, England invented the beautiful game, as in football, soccer. It's Chinese, no way.
And perhaps the most iconic anthem in the whole of English football is You'll Never Walk Alone.
Liverpool.
Appropriately, given the song's title, it is also synonymous with more than one British club, with supporters of both Celtic and Liverpool belting it out before kick-off. In fact, the song is so inextricably linked to Liverpool in particular that those 4 words can be found on the club's badge. It is used in reference to the successful 1963 version by Jerry and or the Pacemakers.
At the time, Jerry and or the Pacemakers were a popular group from Liverpool, perhaps second only to the auto cues failed. I suppose the people are never going to know the identity of that other group now. And so the song and everything it represents is as Liverpudlian as Albert Dock, except it isn't. You see, unlike the band formerly known as the Quarrymen, Jerry and or the Pacemakers did not write their first few hit singles. And this included You'll Never Walk alone. But then you knew that if you happened to be a fan of musicals. I once played Prince Dauntless in Once Upon a Mattress, so it's a touchy subject.
The piece was, in fact, the brainchild of American songwriting duo Rodgers and Hammerstein, who included the track on their Broadway smash Carousel.
So how did it come to be an anthem for England's most trophy-laden club?
Well, by 1963, Jerry Marsden, this time without his pacemakers, is said to have played a demo to Liverpool's legendary manager Bill Shankly, who was like, "That is an absolute banger, mate. Inject that into my veins."
Now, we haven't verified the validity of that quote, but rest assured it was along those lines. Later that year, the song, along with other chart hits of the day, made it onto the terraces of Liverpool's Anfield Stadium. And unlike those other songs, it hasn't left since.
Yeah, Liverpool is probably Anfield, one of the most intimidating away grounds to go. Like the way the stadium is built, like it's very steep. Like, so the sound, the noise just gets amplified. And I think it's like a 65,000 seater. So it's quite a lot of, yeah, it's very loud, very loud.
That's right, even the poppies that are worn by us Brits in the lead up to Remembrance Day aren't actually British. But don't take my word for it, instead, here's me from a year ago discussing it on a YouTube short that you probably missed.
Moyna Michael was an American professor who pioneered the idea of commemorating soldiers with the red poppy.
She'd been inspired to push for it after reading the famed poem In Flanders Fields by John McCrae, himself a Canadian lieutenant colonel.
While teaching a class to disabled World War I servicemen at the University of Georgia, Moyna saw an opportunity to engineer financial support for the wounded by selling poppies. As a result of her efforts, the American Legion Auxiliary and the British Legion Appeal Fund both formalised the poppy as a symbol of remembrance from 1921.
While Britain widely persists with the symbol more than a century later, America has long since phased out the November 11th poppy, with some choosing to wear one during May's Memorial
How he's just frozen in place.
Day. Thanks, Past Lawrence, my neck hurts. And now, just like my mate Daz after an hour on the beach, we go from something red to something even more red. But Father Christmas, one of Santa's pseudonyms while delivering presents in Britain, didn't always wear that particular colour. But as I said in 1987 when Santa brought me a protein pack instead of a proton pack, back up there, mate. Because who was Father Christmas actually? Well, I won't bore you with all of the details because I already did that in this video.
But in a nutshell, it went like this. From English folkloric tradition, Father Christmas was indeed the personification of Christmas.
Historically, he went by several names, including Christmas Lord, Prince Christmas, and I'm not making this one up, Captain Christmas.
But when settlers boarded ships for the New World, they didn't take Captain Christmas with them, presumably opting for an actual captain. There are two big reasons for this. Number one, 17th century Puritans in England had declared Christmas an affront to God, even banning it at one point. And number two, Puritans in New England
Imagine banning Christmas. Why? It's like one of the most nice and, I mean, it's very capitalism driven now, but still, it's very nice and just a great celebration.
And viewed things the same way.
And so many Christmas traditions were shelved, including Father Christmas. But fear not, because 200 years later, with Puritan influence having long since waned, he returned.
However, by the time he was revived by the Victorians, who often depicted him in green robes and a crown ordered on eBay, the US had moved on to other things, such as the Dutch figure Santa Claus.
And at this point you might be thinking, so what, Lawrence? You lied to us. All this tells us is that Father Christmas is still British. Correction, was still British. Because during the 19th century, word of Santa Claus reached England.
People seemed to take a shine to him, and although for a while he and Father Christmas remained distinct, our version started taking on elements of that curious fellow from the North Pole. For instance, his crown disappeared and was replaced by a hood, probably also from eBay.
His waist became larger and his cheeks rosier.
And after Santa Claus was depicted in 19th century cartoons wearing red and white, Father Christmas came to follow suit. I didn't intend
red is just better.
That pun, but gosh, it was good.
And so today you could argue that he remains Father Christmas in name only, hence why a lot of Brits just call him Santa Claus. When you hear the word tea, there's only one country that comes to mind, Britain. I've just realised that's 3 countries.
Nonetheless, the British fixation with tea is very real, dating back to the 1660s when it was brought to England by Catherine of Braganza, the future Queen of England. Just over a century later, Britain was so enamored with tea that Americans in Boston famously copied us by hosting a tea party of their own.
And on a personal note, the one thing that Americans assume most about me is that I prefer tea to coffee, which is only true if I've had 3 coffees. That said, British people do generally love their tea, whereas Americans, more often than not, are indifferent. Instead, the latter love their lattes. And so it will surprise absolutely everybody to learn that tea bags were invented not in Britain, but
India?
Milwaukee.
The first patent, or patent if you will, was filed in that
yeah, of course. I mean, the title of the video is actually American.
city in 1903 by its inventors Roberta Lawson and Mary McLaren. Within 5 years, the idea caught the attention of New York importer Thomas Sullivan, who subsequently had them shipped around the world. The tea bags, not the inventors.
Today, tea bags are a common household item in Britain. But Yorkshire tea, which is manufactured 80 miles from my English hometown, owes everything to 2 people 80 miles from this one.
Behold, US
what are the
patent,
odds?
patent
What a coincidence.
723287, the tea leaf holder. Is that what it's called?
And so, if I've learned anything from this 2-part series, it is that both of my homelands have a rich history of influencing each other. In many ways, our special relationship feels more like one of siblings. We might squabble from time to time, but it's only because we can't stand each other. Soon, I'll be looking at recent words that Britain took from America.
Oh, God. Wow, the tea bag one really took me by surprise. Like, because America, when I think of America, I just don't think of tea drinkers. Like, I know you guys like your iced tea, but you don't use a tea bag to make iced tea. It usually comes in, you know, a bottle. So, yeah, to find out that you guys invented the tea bag, that was a genuine shocker. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.